I moved into Birchwood Hills 3 years ago, attracted by the wide, tree-lined streets and the promise of a calm suburban atmosphere. Located on the outskirts of a mid-sized American city, Birchwood Hills looked like an idyllic place to raise a family or simply enjoy quiet evenings away from urban sprawl. The houses were moderately sized, with neat lawns and driveways leading up to garages that often contained neat racks of gardening tools. Shortly after settling in, I learned about the Homeowners Association, a typical arrangement in many American suburbs, meant to keep property values consistent and resolve neighborly disputes. However, Birchwood Hills HOA had a reputation for being slightly overbearing, with frequent emails reminding residents of lawn mowing schedules and precise guidelines for where trash bins should be placed. The real issue, though, stemmed from a single individual within the HOA, Barbara Karen Garnett. Some used the name Karen as a not-so-subtle dig at her behavior. She was in her late 40s, middle-aged but possessed of an almost militant energy when it came to protecting the community standard. Always impeccably groomed, with short, styled hair and pastel dress suits, Karen had the uncanny ability to appear anywhere she suspected a code infraction might be occurring. People joked that she had the perimeter of Birchwood Hills rigged with motion sensors. At first, I considered her an annoyance, someone who might frown at the length of my grass or the color of my mailbox. Then, one evening, we all received an email blast from the HOA with a bold subject line. Notice: new 9 p.m. community curfew, gates locked. The short message read, "Attention, Birchwood Hills residents. Effective immediately, our main gates will close and lock nightly at 9 p.m. sharp to preserve neighborhood tranquility and ensure the safety of all residents. Anyone who is not inside the neighborhood by then will need to call the security line to gain admittance, which may or may not be granted depending on approval from HOA leadership. This measure aims to reduce late-night disturbances and maintain the peaceful environment of Birchwood Hills. We trust everyone will comply. Sincerely, Karen Garnett, Birchwood Hills HOA, Security Liaison." I reread the email, stunned. A 9 p.m. curfew? That was downright absurd. We weren't children, and this wasn't some gated retirement village with rigid lights-out rules. Was Karen even authorized to implement such a measure unilaterally? The short explanation, "to preserve neighborhood tranquility," didn't clarify the impetus behind it. All we had was her say-so. Nonetheless, she had apparently updated the security instructions so the main gates would indeed lock at that hour, and the guard station, previously just decorative, would henceforth remain staffed until midnight, courtesy of HOA funds. A handful of residents might have believed in the measure, but the majority saw it as nothing more than Karen's latest power play. She had always yearned for more authority, and with her new role as security liaison, she had discovered a convenient angle: fear of nighttime crime, or loitering, or who knew what else. The truth was, Birchwood Hills had an incredibly low crime rate. There was almost no justification for a 9 p.m. lockup. After stewing for a day or two, I considered my options. I could write an angry letter to the HOA board, but I suspected Karen would find a way to override it. I could ignore the rule, but I risked incurring fines or being locked out of my own neighborhood if I dared stay out past 9. Then an idea emerged, a way to highlight the rule's ridiculousness without violating it outright. Little did I know it would spark a small revolution in Birchwood Hills' attitude toward Karen's petty tyranny. Since moving in, I'd grown close with several neighbors who shared my skepticism about the HOA's overreach. Among them were Alex and Brandy, a married couple who enjoyed late evening strolls with their dog and were baffled at the notion they'd have to be inside by 9 p.m. Tim, a single father who often returned from his evening shift at a restaurant after 9 p.m. What was he supposed to do? Ring some special hotline each night. Marcia, a retiree with a down-to-earth attitude, who insisted she'd sit on her porch swing as long as she pleased, no matter what. We ended up sharing texts and phone calls, venting about the new curfew. Finally, in one group chat, I proposed, what if we show how ridiculous this curfew is by hosting a gathering that ends precisely at 8:59 p.m.? That way we're not technically violating anything, but we make a statement that this rule is silly and inconveniences the entire community. Within minutes, my phone lit up with enthusiastic responses. Alex, love it. Karen can't find us if we're out by 8:59, right? Marcia, count me in. I'll bring a batch of brownies or something sweet. Tim, I get off at 7:30 that day, so I can be there. Perfect timing for dinner. Before long, the concept crystallized. An end by 8:59 p.m. barbecue. We'd set it up on a Saturday evening, invite the entire neighborhood, and emphasize that we would finish the event the moment the clock struck 8 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Everyone would then disperse or head inside, leaving Karen's precious curfew with no actual violators. It was petty, sure, but also a peaceful act of protest. I volunteered my backyard as the venue. It was spacious enough to accommodate a good crowd, with a sturdy grill and a few picnic tables I'd purchased at a home improvement sale. In case of overflow, we could overflow into my driveway, or even the sidewalk, but we'd be mindful to keep the streets clear. The key was not to break any rules and give Karen zero ammo. Soon, the event took shape. We set a date 2 weekends away, giving folks time to plan. Others in the community, upon hearing about it, cheered the idea. We ended up calling it the 8:59 barbecue in group messages. Jokingly, I sent out a tongue-in-cheek invite. Join us for a barbecue. And at 8:59 sharp. Date, Saturday, date, 5 p.m. to 8:59 p.m. Where? My place, house number 28, Oakwood Lane. Why? Because apparently, 9 p.m. is too late to be outside in Birchwood Hills now. Let's enjoy good food and company, just not a moment past 8:59. Bring sides, drinks, or desserts to share. We'll have the grill going. By the end of that week, we had at least 30 neighbors committed to attending. Word had definitely gotten out. Even some who usually steered clear of HOA drama expressed interest. It helped that the new curfew had angered night owls and shift workers alike, plus anyone with teenagers who might come home after extracurriculars. Meanwhile, Karen had not, yet, responded publicly to our plan, but she'd likely heard about it. I braced myself for pushback. It didn't take long for Karen to send out an ominous email labeled, "Reminder, Curfew Enforcement." Within it, she reiterated that gates would lock at 9 p.m., and any public gatherings continuing past that hour would be met with potential fines or forced dispersal. The email read, "To all residents, please recall the recently enacted Birchwood Hills curfew. No unnecessary outdoor activity after 9 p.m. This includes large gatherings that might disrupt neighbors' rest. We expect all events to end well before the official curfew time to allow for cleanup and quiet. Failure to comply may result in enforcement measures, including but not limited to HOA fines. Thank you for your cooperation. Sincerely, Karen Garnett, Birchwood Hills HOA Security Liaison." My phone buzzed within seconds, neighbors forwarding me the message, outraged. Yet, ironically, her scolding only fed our determination to show that we could comply while simultaneously highlighting the absurdity. I responded to a group text. "No worries. Our barbecue ends exactly at 8:59. No violation. Let Karen watch us pack up right on time." The next day, I ran into Karen in the neighborhood while jogging. She flagged me down, stepping in front of me as if she were a traffic cop. "I hear you're planning some sort of borderline event," she said, arching an eyebrow. I shrugged, playing innocent. "It's just a barbecue for friends and neighbors. We're finishing at 8:59, so no rules will be broken." Her mouth twisted. "We'll see about that. I'll be monitoring. If there's any noise or crowd lingering after 9 p.m., I'll consider it a direct violation. And trust me, I won't hesitate to bring it to the board's attention." I gave a pleasant nod. "Thank you for the heads up, Karen. We'll be sure to be respectful and end on time." She looked a bit flustered by my polite tone, as if expecting an argument. Instead, I jogged off, adrenaline surging, not from the run, but from the small thrill of standing up to her. Karen was used to winning through intimidation. This time, we were turning her rule against her, in the most civil and by-the-book manner possible. As the chosen Saturday approached, neighbors pitched in to ensure the barbecue would be a hit. Alex and Brandy volunteered to bring a second grill, so we could cook more food at once. Tim offered chairs and a portable speaker for background music, though we vowed to keep the volume modest, to avoid claims of noise disturbance. Marcia, the retiree with a sweet tooth, baked an enormous sheet cake with the words 8:59 or bust piped in frosting. I tidied my backyard, mowed the grass, set up extra trash bins, and hung a banner reading, "Enjoy the evening." until 8:59 p.m. I also drew a large chalkboard sign listing an hour-by-hour schedule. 5 to 6 o'clock, arrivals, setup, drinks. 6 to 7:30, grilling and dinner. 7:30 to 8 o'clock, desserts and mingling. 8 to 8:30, lawn games for those who want to. 8:30 to 8:55, wind down, final cleanup. 8:59, hard stop. Every detail was planned to highlight the fact we'd complied down to the minute. I half expected Karen to show up mid-event with a stopwatch, scolding anyone who dared linger. But so long as we ended precisely at 8:59, she had no legal ground to stand on. On the morning of the barbecue, I woke up to bright sunshine, perfect weather for an outdoor cookout. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oaks lining my backyard. I felt that nervous, excited buzz in my stomach, hoping everything would run smoothly and that Karen wouldn't find some underhanded way to sabotage us. By noon, the first wave of neighbors dropped by with folding chairs, extra coolers, and tablecloths. We set them up methodically, as though preparing for a meticulously staged block party. At around 2 p.m., I spotted Karen's car rolling slowly past my house. She was likely scoping out the preparations. I offered a friendly wave from the driveway. She did not wave back, merely peering through her tinted window with a faint scowl before continuing on. My grin widened. Tonight would be interesting. By 4:45 p.m., I had the grill fired up and the first batch of burgers sizzling. The sweet aroma of charcoal smoke drifted through the air. Folks began arriving on foot, parents with kids in tow, couples carrying trays of marinated meat or big bowls of salad, and even a few older residents pushing walkers or driving up in golf carts from the far side of Birchwood Hills. The mood was cheerful, almost festival-like. Everyone kept remarking on how silly the 9 p.m. rule was, how they intended to enjoy the evening to the fullest within the arbitrary constraint. Right at 5 o'clock, music started playing softly from Tim's portable speaker, some upbeat tunes at a modest volume, ensuring we didn't breach any noise regulations. People grabbed plates, loaded them with hot dogs, burgers, veggie skewers, or homemade sides. Kids scampered around with water guns or kicked a soccer ball in a corner of the yard. A line formed at the grill, but it moved quickly thanks to the extra cooking station. The entire scene felt exactly like a normal community gathering, until you remembered that we had a countdown to 8:59 hanging over our heads. Marcia's comedic announcements kept the spirit light. At 5:30, she jokingly declared, "We have exactly 3.5 hours left, folks. Let's savor them." Everyone laughed, including me. The fact we were all so aware of the ticking clock turned the event into a playful game. "We must celebrate freedom before 9 p.m., someone quipped, leading to more chuckles. As more neighbors flowed in, I noticed a figure lurking across the street near a silver sedan. Karen, arms crossed, wearing a pastel blazer and dark slacks. She stared at the festivities from a distance, as though wanting to catch us in some act of defiance. Several times, she raised her phone, possibly snapping pictures or videos. It was borderline creepy, but we carried on, paying her as little mind as possible. By 6 p.m., my backyard was bustling with at least 40 people, and more trickled in. The extra grill was now manned by Alex, while Brandy circulated with a pitcher of iced tea. There were so many kids that one family set up a ring toss game in the front yard to keep them entertained. A few teenage neighbors, who'd usually be out with friends, showed up just to see what was happening. The sense of camaraderie was palpable. I kept glancing at my watch. Time seemed to fly. Already, it was nearly 6:45. In a normal setting, we'd have hours left to relax. But we had planned to begin cleanup no later than 8:30. One of the older residents, a frank-talking man named Ed, joked that we should ring a giant bell at 8:59. "We can call it the Karen bell," he said, grinning. Others snickered, but we decided that might be too on the nose. We didn't want to feed her reason to claim harassment. Around 7 p.m., I stepped onto the small deck that overlooked the yard, tapped the microphone attached to our modest speaker, and spoke up. "All right, folks, we're about 2 hours away from the dreaded 9 p.m. Remember, the official plan is to finish by 8:59. In case anyone needs it, we have to keep the volume down after 8:30, so there's no excuse about a noise violation. Let's prove we can follow Karen's curfew, and show how pointless it is in the process." Cheers erupted. A wave of supportive claps and laughter spread. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride. This barbecue had transformed from a simple protest into a unifying event. People who rarely mingled were chatting, playing yard games, swapping stories about run-ins with HOA rules. It was the kind of neighborly bonding that, ironically, the HOA claimed to want. Only, in reality, it was our act of defiance. Meanwhile, Karen continued to hover on the periphery of the neighborhood. Occasionally, she moved her car or strolled by, scowling. We watched her from afar, but never engaged. As long as we stuck to the plan, she had no grounds to intervene. At 7:45 p.m., the atmosphere was still festive, but people became noticeably more mindful of the time. Parents who had younger children started packing up a bit. I announced that we'd serve dessert promptly at 8 p.m., Marcia's giant sheet cake plus whatever other sweets folks had brought. The idea was to ensure everyone had enough time to enjoy dessert before the final exit. By 8 o'clock, a line formed at the dessert table. Marcia's frosted words, 8:59 or bust, garnered plenty of smartphone snapshots. The crowd was in high spirits, some even humming or softly singing along to the background music. The kids, once rowdy, seemed to sense the grown-ups' excitement about beating the clock. During this window, I took a quiet moment to scan the street. Sure enough, Karen had parked her sedan a few houses away and was standing by the trunk, talking to someone, likely a security guard or an HOA crony. My stomach tensed. Would she try a last-minute stunt? Perhaps she'd call the police with a bogus noise complaint or march over demanding we shut down early. I reminded myself we'd done everything by the book. The official noise ordinance in our city typically started at 10 p.m., so 8:59 was hardly late. We had a clean record. I grabbed a slice of cake, wandering among the clusters of neighbors. Tim, who arrived around 5:45 after his shift, slapped me on the back. "Thanks for doing this, man," he said, gesturing around. I never realized how many cool folks live here, because we're usually stuck behind our locked gates or weird rules. I laughed. "Glad you could make it. Just be sure to leave by 8:59 if you value your freedom." He rolled his eyes, smirking. "We'll see about that," he teased. But I knew he wouldn't risk it. He had a toddler at home, and the last thing he needed was a confrontation with Karen. At 8:30 p.m., I hopped back onto the small deck and tapped the mic again. "Fellow residents, we have 29 minutes left. Let's start tidying. Trash goes in the big bins by the fence. Grab your last bites and drinks. We'll do a wrap-up toast at 8:55. Then everyone's got to head home so we can lock down at 9. The crowd hooped and cheered, fully embracing the spectacle. Teams of neighbors bustled around, collecting paper plates, cups, and empty containers. A few of the men folded up extra chairs and loaded them onto a small cart. The kids, now exhausted, cooperated more easily than normal, oddly excited by the countdown's sense of urgency. Despite the rush, nobody seemed upset. On the contrary, it was like we were all giddy co-conspirators in a friendly, harmless rebellion. 8:40. 8:45. The minutes ticked away. The speaker's music had been switched off. No sense giving Karen a chance to claim we were excessively loud. The yard was nearly spotless now, just a few leftover trays of food on the folding tables. Some folks took their leftover burgers or salads home in Tupperware. Others bagged up the final bits of trash. Meanwhile, a few lingered to chat about how the night had gone. "We should do this again," one neighbor said. "Even if the rule is gone, this was fun." At 8:50, I felt a surge of nerves. Nothing had gone wrong so far, but Karen was unpredictable. I scanned the street. There she was, standing at the corner, arms folded, illuminated by a streetlight. She seemed to be waiting for something, some slip-up. But our clock read 8:50, and we were well on track. By 8:55, I gathered everyone for a final short speech. A hush fell over the group. "Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight," I said, raising a plastic cup of soda. "We proved we can have a great time in this neighborhood, even if we have to end by 9 p.m. Here's to many more gatherings, hopefully without arbitrary curfews. Now let's finalize the exit so we're off the streets or in our homes by 8:59. The crowd raised their cups, cheered, and clapped. The exodus was surprisingly swift. Some folks walked home, chatting in small groups. Others hopped in their cars parked along the curb. By 8:57, my backyard was practically empty, save for a few neighbors who lived next door, helping me load leftover items into my garage. I heard a few goodbyes from the driveway, glimpsed people waving as they hurried to their front doors. At 8:58, I led the final group onto the sidewalk. We parted ways quickly, each heading to our respective houses. A giddy thrill fluttered in my chest. We'd done it. No stragglers, no late-night mess, no violation. The neighborhood was quiet and calm before 9 p.m. I stepped onto my porch, checking my phone's clock. 8:59. Right then, I spotted Karen stepping out from behind a hedge near her sedan. She looked toward me, as though hoping to see a cluster of people partying. But the street was still. The only sign of our big bash was a slight barbecue aroma lingering in the air. Grinning, I gave her a polite wave. She stood there, stiff and annoyed, with no recourse. She had nothing to enforce. No one was violating the curfew. With a flourish, I opened my front door and walked inside, letting it click shut just as my phone switched to 9 p.m. Through the window blinds, I caught Karen's frustrated expression. Then she turned and marched off, presumably to lock the gates or bark at the security guard. Meanwhile, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. Our entire neighborhood had neatly sidestepped her petty regulation. She had no grounds to complain. The next morning, Sunday, the neighborhood was abuzz with chatter. Several of us texted in the group chat. How did it feel ending at 8:59? Karen looked so upset. Best barbecue in years. People seemed genuinely united by our comedic act of compliance. Some even posted about it on the private Birchwood Hills social media page. Photos of the event and short comments praising the sense of solidarity. Karen, for her part, responded with a terse message on that same page. Karen G. I am glad to see everyone complied with the 9 p.m. curfew last night. However, I have received concerns about the size of the gathering and potential noise earlier in the evening. Please remember that large parties can be disruptive, even if they end before curfew. A few polite but pointed replies followed, essentially saying, the noise level was minimal, and we ended on time. No complaints from immediate neighbors. Indeed, no official noise violation had been filed. Even local law enforcement, who sometimes receive calls from Karen about suspicious activity, was not contacted. We'd been squeaky clean. She had no ammunition beyond vague insinuations. That afternoon, I caught up with Linda, an HOA board member who was more reasonable than Karen. She confided that the board was aware of the barbecue protest. She laughed lightly. The 9 p.m. curfew was Karen's pet project. She somehow convinced a couple of others that it was necessary for security, but after last night, I think many see how impractical it is. In fact, we're scheduling an HOA meeting next week to reconsider the measure. My spirits soared. If the board was moving to overturn the curfew, we might soon be free of that ridiculous constraint. Linda warned me that Karen would fight tooth and nail to keep it. But the rest of the board was beginning to question both its legality and necessity. On Wednesday evening, the special HOA meeting took place at the Birchwood Hills Community Center. I arrived early, along with a crowd of neighbors. The usually empty plastic chairs were nearly all occupied, a testament to how strongly people felt about the curfew. At the front of the room sat the 5 board members: Linda, Kyle, the treasurer, Joanne, the secretary, Mark, general member, and Karen, security liaison. Linda called the meeting to order with a calm tap of her gavel. We're here to discuss the 9 p.m. curfew policy instituted last month. Several residents have expressed concerns. Our agenda is to hear from both sides and then vote on whether to retain, modify, or repeal this rule. Karen immediately seized the mic. Thank you, Linda, she said, voice brimming with authority. I proposed this curfew after we received multiple complaints about late-night disturbances, noise, roaming teenagers, potential trespassers. This policy was designed to keep our community safe. Even if a few individuals found it inconvenient, we must prioritize overall security. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably, exchanging skeptical looks. Linda let Karen continue. The barbecue last weekend highlighted how compliance can be achieved gracefully. That said, I remain convinced that, left unchecked, nighttime gatherings can and will escalate into disruptions. At that point, Linda opened the floor for resident comments. Tim rose first, explaining how the curfew complicated his life as a restaurant worker. I come home sometimes at 10 p.m. Now I need special permission to unlock the gates or risk being locked out of my own property. That's insane. Others applauded. He added, also, We have no record of any real crime wave here. This measure is disproportionate. Next up was Marcia, the retiree. She sighed. I enjoy stargazing from my porch or going for a twilight walk. Now I'm scared I'll be locked out. We never had these issues before. This is just one person's obsession with control. Several more neighbors echoed these sentiments, citing how the locked gates felt oppressive, especially with no proven threat. Finally, Linda invited me to speak. I described how I organized the barbecue, specifically to illustrate that the rule punishes normal social activities. We ended at 8:59, but that's an absurd standard in a free country. Why must grown adults rush home before a certain time? We're not children. This is an arbitrary restriction. Karen interjected. But you complied, correct? So it wasn't impossible. If you ended at 8:59, that suggests the rule didn't hamper you too much. A few eyes rolled in the audience. I took a steadying breath. Sure, we complied once, in a mock protest kind of way. But next time, we might want to celebrate a birthday until 10 or 11 p.m., like normal people do. We pay mortgage or rent here. We're not lawbreakers. We shouldn't be subjected to a lockdown by 9 p.m. The barbecue's success actually proves how stifling the rule is for everyday life. That drew approving nods. Finally, Linda closed public comment and asked the board to deliberate. Karen launched into a final tirade, citing potential liability if something happened late at night. She mentioned insurance concerns, which Linda gently refuted, saying no insurer mandated a 9 p.m. curfew. Mark, the general board member, pointed out that crime rates were near zero in Birchwood Hills, rendering the rule purely cosmetic. Kyle, the treasurer, reminded everyone of the cost of staffing a guard station for no real reason, money that could be better spent on community improvements. When Linda called for a vote, Karen was the only one still in favor of keeping the curfew. The other 4 members voted to revoke it, effectively dismantling Karen's short-lived regime of forced early lockup. The audience erupted in applause. Karen's face reddened, but she couldn't override a 4-1 board decision. News spread quickly. The 9 p.m. gate lock was rescinded. Effective immediately, the gates would remain open as they always had, with no special code or security measure beyond the standard motion cameras at the entrance. People rejoiced, texting me and others who had organized the protest. We did it, read one exclamation from Alex. Another from Marcia read. Turns out your 8:59 barbecue was the best example of how ridiculous that rule was. Karen's subsequent email was grudging. Attention, residents. The curfew policy has been nullified by the HOA board. However, please continue practicing caution and be mindful of noise levels at night. We want Birchwood Hills to remain a peaceful place. Karen Garnett, security liaison. She clung to her title, but her power was clearly diminished. In the weeks following, the board quietly stripped some of her unilateral security privileges, requiring a majority sign-off before any new rule or measure could be implemented. If she had further authoritarian ideas, she'd face far more scrutiny than before. Meanwhile, our neighbors found a renewed sense of camaraderie. People recognized that if we stood together, Karen's misguided regulations could be neutralized. My 8:59 barbecue became a running joke. Some called it the curfew meltdown party. Others teased that they wanted to do an 8:58 fireworks show. We had, in effect, used compliance to highlight the silliness of her rule, forcing the board to confront reality. Life in Birchwood Hills returned to its normal, relaxed pace, only now a bit more unified. Tim was free to come home after work without hassle. Marcia resumed her evening porch time. Alex and Brandy could stroll their dog at 9:30 if they wished. Freed from the specter of a locked gate, neighbors felt less policed and more neighborly. I, too, enjoyed the renewed sense of freedom. One Friday evening, nearly a month after the barbecue, some neighbors dropped by spontaneously around 9:15 with ice cream. We sat on my back porch, chatting until almost 10. That might have been a trivial pleasure once, but now it felt like a triumph. No more worrying about Karen rushing in to scold us. Karen herself remained around, naturally, still the type to issue minor complaints about lawn decorations or the height of hedges. But she no longer had the same menacing aura. People realized her threats could be challenged. Linda's leadership, bolstered by the rest of the board, kept her in check. Occasionally, I'd see Karen in passing. She refused eye contact, harboring resentment over her defeat. But that was her problem, not mine. Later, I heard rumors that she tried to propose a weekend quiet hour at 8 p.m., citing older residents needing earlier rest. The board swiftly shut it down, referencing her fiasco with the 9 p.m. curfew. She'd effectively become the punchline of her own attempts at control. People joked, "Better watch out, or Karen will demand bedtime stories at 7:45. In short, we found our happy ending. The neighborhood embraced a balanced approach to security and courtesy, unencumbered by an arbitrary lockdown. The 8:59 barbecue stood as a cheeky turning point, demonstrating that petty rules can be undone when neighbors unite in a creative, nonviolent display of compliance. Our success reminded everyone that an HOA could serve its residents, rather than subjugate them. Thus, the next time I consider hosting a gathering, I'll do so without glancing nervously at the clock and without the specter of Karen's curfew. We overcame her attempt to micromanage our evenings, and ironically, we did it by following her rule exactly, to the letter. Finishing by 8:59 p.m. left no room for her to cry foul, and the subsequent wave of ridicule and reason toppled her ill-conceived measure. Now, nights in Birchwood Hills can stretch peacefully into the late hours, free of pointless restrictions, and that's exactly how we want it.